As the conflict in West Asia enters its 39th day, the Strait of Hormuz remains disrupted, massively disrupting energy flows around the world. Economies of most of the countries in the world stand imperiled. The combatants, however, show no signs of giving up, both rhetorically and militarily. China, a country with aspirations of becoming the second pole in a multipolar world, is somehow showing signs of an ambiguity bordering on indifference to the whole situation in West Asia. So, what exactly is China thinking? To understand whether this, this strategy or lack of it is deliberate, we have with us Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan, former member of the National Security Advisory Board. He is the founding Director General of Center for Contemporary China Studies in the Ministry of External Affairs, and he's also a distinguished fellow at the Gateway House. Welcome to Samvad, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayan.
Sir, China remains Iran's largest trading partner with 80% of Iranian fuel and 30% of Iranian trade going to China. It is a key ally in BRICS and SCO, and it's also a member of the Belt and Road Initiative. But somehow, instead of showing more vocal support for Iran, China appears to be standing very indifferent. Instead of bringing a resolution, as one would have expected of a member of the United Nations Security Council, the only resolution we have had till now is a resolution condemning Iran for attacking the Gulf countries. It's a massively, it went again massively against Iran. With China and Russia, very close allies, they basically abstained and did not even vote against this Security Council motion. So, what I would like to understand, sir, what explains this Chinese reluctance to stand by a country with which it has close ties and even signed a 25-year-old strategic cooperation agreement worth $400 billion in 2021?
That's a very good observation as well as a very good question, Dr. Mayan. Let me explain it in this manner. Okay. What I think China wanted to do for Iran, I think it did before the war commenced. If you take your mind back, there were reports that there are a lot of aircraft landing from China to Iran, into Iran, before the war started. So also there is a parallel to this. If you take your mind back to Sindoor, you found that China, actually sent PL-15 missiles, etc., to Pakistan before Sindoor started. So I think whatever Iran asked of China, I think it probably met the requirement before the war started. That is one. Second, what is China's interest in the Strait of Hormuz? As you mentioned, a lot of oil of Iran flows towards China. So even at the beginning of the war, Iranians said Chinese ships will be exempt from the barricade that they've established. I mean, the blockade that they've established. So China got what it wanted, that there's no shortage of fuel for itself, and the oil flew through Strait of Hormuz. In addition to that, China has been creating strategic reserves of petroleum in its own country. It has got a strategic reserve of 130 days. At some point in time, it is hoping to make it to 180 days. Okay. So any short-term kind of disruptions do not affect China so much. There is the other factor that played into this. The one more factor is China and US are in the advanced stages of discussions on the trade part of it. If you take your mind back, Mr. Trump was to go to China in this month, the month of April, which is postponed till the war is over. So the thing is that they were also hoping to get some kind of agreement with the Americans. That also played a role. Europe, which had a problem with US in supporting this war. And if in the initial stages, if you look at it, none of the NATO countries literally supported US in this operation. Ultimately, of course, later on, UK and France sent one ship, and UK allowed certain amount of use of its bases, etc. So Europe was not on board. China has got a large stake in Europe. Okay. China has got a large stake in Europe. China has got a large stake in US, and its own oil was coming through. And so obviously, it didn't feel the necessity to actually interfere too much into this. That is one.
Mm.
The second point is Chinese are not known to enter into battle for anybody else. They will fight for themselves when it is required, but otherwise they will not enter and fight into the war of others. So China kept away from this entire thing. The third thing is more the US is involved in the Gulf, you will find the absence of US from Western Pacific.
Mm.
If you take your mind back, they shifted the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is the aircraft carrier which was in the Western Pacific, to the Gulf, which means the resources of US. Also, they removed the THAAD, I mean the terminal high altitude air defense system which they deployed in Korea. They removed it and brought it to Gulf. So it works to the advantage of the Chinese if the Iranians are involved in a war like this. And so they would have probably seen the weighed the balance of advantages and disadvantages. And probably they felt that keeping quiet is better for them to overcome all this, and it also helps them to increase their influence in the Western Pacific. Now, of course, with the attention of US diverted from Taiwan and South China Sea into Gulf, that area is free for Chinese to improve their influence. So
Mm.
these are the factors I think would have weighed with them, and that is probably the reason why China is actually keeping just quiet about the whole thing. And of course, abstaining is kind of a support that can be assumed that it gave to Iran. And in addition to that, on the quiet, they have been helping Iran with, I mean, there are reports which say that they have been helping Iran with targeting data, etc., because Iran is already embedded into the Peito 3 navigation system that they have. So that is something which is actually an inherent help that the Iranians are getting from the Chinese outside the open view of the public, etc. So that is another help that China is giving to Iran. In addition, this Iranian war also helped China to study how the Western countries like Israel and US carry out the operations. In fact, if you take your mind back, there was a report called a company called Mizar Vision in Shanghai, which is a government-backed company. It doesn't have a satellite, but what it does is it takes the commercial satellite pictures that are available, use the AI on it, and they have actually geotagged each and every aircraft of the US that is operating in the Gulf area. So now they study the patterns. Okay, this aircraft, when does it land? How much time does it spend on land? How is the sortie generation taking place? How much time does it remain on air? What is the pattern in which it is flying? Whole lot of things that they study. So it helps them to do this. So all these factors put together, I think it helps the Chinese to remain quiet so that they can delay the benefits, simultaneously silently supporting Iran so that Iran also doesn't make a noise on this. And I think they are actually reaping the benefits of this entire war that is happening in the Gulf.
Sir, but on the other side also, sir, this quietness, because there are many countries involved in the whole situation. In fact, in 2023, the Chinese had brokered this relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which had gone
Yeah.
cold for a very long time. And even the Gulf countries were, because of the unpredictability coming out of the United States, the Gulf countries were also looking towards China as some sort of a pivot. So, but this calculated neutrality, I would call it, sir, in the face of this crisis, this, I mean, there might be countries which think that this comprehensive economic cooperation, this comprehensive cooperation agreement which they had, is a purely extractive hedge rather than a genuine security and strategic architecture. So how will the other countries in the Gulf now, how will they think about, will they not think twice about their pivot to the east towards China?
Actually speaking, the US has been for a long time remained invested in West Asian countries. You would have seen that. In the Middle East, they had invested themselves a lot. Even if you take your mind back to 2020 when the Abraham Accords were signed,
Mhm.
some of these countries actually signed on to the UAE, Bahrain, etc., signed on to Abraham Accords to maintain better relationship with Israel. In fact, they were also on the verge of signing an agreement with Saudi Arabia when all this went wrong. Okay, when this 7th October 23 event happened in Israel, where Hamas attacked Israel. Till that time, there was hope that, probably Saudi Arabia and Israel also will sign the Abraham Accords. In fact, recently, a couple of days ago, Mr. Trump has mentioned that, I hope Saudi Arabia signs the Abraham Accords. Okay. And as a start point to the Iran war, if you had noticed, there was also reports that are coming out. US entered into this war based on the pressure from Saudi Arabia and Israel. I mean, in addition to Israel, Saudi Arabia also put pressure on US to start this war against Iran. Notwithstanding all this, you find this peace plan that China promoted in 2021 when Mr. Wang Yi had traveled to the West Asian countries. He proposed a 5-point peace plan there. That is for the West Asian countries. That is based on the premise that US will not remain invested in West Asian countries. Because in the Trump 1.0, you saw there's a slow withdrawal of US from their commitments in the West Asian countries. And in addition to that, you mentioned rightly about that agreement that they got signed with Iran of $400 billion, which over a 25-year period, they were supposed to be investing in infrastructure, defense, etc., etc. But my own understanding is of that agreement, nothing much has been delivered so far. That is the prime concern about that agreement. Notwithstanding that, Chinese also brokered this Iran-Saudi Arabia peace kind of a thing some time ago. That has not gone down really, that has not gone through really well so far. I mean, they did sign something, but then the relationship remained tenuous, and then it was not a very comfortable thing to be in. So if you keep all these things in mind, the West Asian countries, I wouldn't really subscribe to their viewpoint that they were pivoting towards China. In fact, it's the other way around. China was trying to woo them to be, to enter into West Asian countries and be part of that system. Basically, because they were replacing something which the US was doing. As the US was withdrawing, there was a space that was created, and Chinese were trying to move into it. So it was not actually the West Asian countries were looking to move towards China, but it is the Chinese who are more interested in going into West Asia. I think if you look at it from that viewpoint, you find that they have still the leverages. I mean, it's not that because they have not supported anything, it's going to go wrong. When this war is over, you will find that the West Asian countries, which have allowed the American bases to be in their countries, thinking that they will give protection to the West Asian countries, the role has changed. Now the West Asian countries are expected to provide protection to the American bases that are located in West Asia. So obviously there is going to be some kind of dissatisfaction towards US, which is going to brew in the West Asian countries. That is the time probably the Chinese will probably move in with the kind of money that they have got, with the kind of projects that they can do. Because now, with so much of destruction taking place in the West Asian countries, China is really well placed to go in and then rebuild those places. And they will give offers of lower price and cost, etc., and win many of the contracts that the West Asian countries will be looking for now to rebuild themselves. So there are many factors that will link this West Asian countries to China, not necessarily in terms of geostrategic or geopolitical issues, but also of geoeconomic issues. So in any case, the dependency of China for oil and gas from the West Asian countries is going to continue. That will also be there. So there is an interdependence which will develop, and that will probably create the kind of influence that China is hoping to get in the West Asian countries.
So a number of American security analysts who have seen who say that China is maintaining distance because it is lacking the will and the prowess. The exact word somebody used, the will and prowess to challenge the US militarily, and that is why it is staying away from the whole conflict. It appears to be ambiguous. So, I mean, is it really? I mean, because this is something which has been going on in the Western circles for a long time, particularly American circles. So, is it a question of lack of capability or a calculated preservation of force? Because this strategic distance could be seen as a weakness by many countries, or it is very disciplined that they don't want to be diverted from their primary theaters, which is the Indo-Pacific. So because China is also seen as a security guarantor for many countries. So will this impact them as a security guarantor, or they're fine with it? The countries are fine with it. It's a temporary phase which will pass away.
That's a very good question. I mean, if you take your mind back to the modernization program of the Chinese military capabilities, okay, it is not before 2035, 2035, that they will complete the modernization of the PLA. Until that time, I don't think they will venture out into any of the adventures outside that region. That is point number one. Second, this is a war that US is fighting along with Israel against Iran. China has got no stakes there to go and start fighting the US and the Israel. China-Israel relations also you need to keep in mind. They have a good relationship, by the way. In fact, if you take your mind back to the J-10 aircraft of theirs, that is a design which Israelis gave to them. There's a Lavi aircraft that they had, the design that gave it to the Chinese. That is what is the backbone of J-10 aircraft of Chinese. So China-Israel relationship also you should keep in mind. China, US in any case, as I explained to you, they are looking for some kind of deal to go through, and so they don't want to upset that apple cart at this point in time. While Chinese are building themselves up, their exertion of force has been limited to 2, 3 places. One, of course, opposite Taiwan. Every day you find Chinese ships and aircraft violating that median line and then trying to bust the ADIZ of Taiwan. Second, East China Sea. Third, South China Sea. In South China Sea, particularly Second Thomas Shoal, where the Philippines have got a Sierra Madre ship that is actually grounded there. When they try to resupply that ship, they always keep, troubling the Philippines Coast Guard. Beyond that, if you find, and of course, they have been busing the aircraft of Australians and everybody else. The Chinese submarine has just popped up 50 meters away from a US destroyer some time ago. So these kind of things that they keep doing. But they have kept it actually confined to South China Sea. They have not actually exposed themselves outside of South China Sea as yet. That does not mean that they will not do it. They may do it, but at a later stage. They also do these joint patrols with the Russians along the Miyako Straits and in the Japan Sea, etc. That continues. So basic thing is their influence or the military influence is restricted to their claim line in the South China Sea. That first island chain is what they are looking at this point in time. Once their influence is complete there, then they will start moving toward the second island chain, where the Guam and other places will come. The Pacific Island countries will come into play. So till that time, they find themselves strong enough to exert that influence. They will not try and venture into any other operation which will put them behind in their modernization plans. That is my understanding. The way other things will come up is what you see in the Indian Ocean. Like, for example, their intelligence ships keep traversing. Their gray zone hulls in the garb of fishing trawlers, etc., they keep coming into Indian Ocean. The Yuan Wang series, the Liao Wang series, the satellite tracking ships, etc., they keep floating around in Indian Ocean. These things will continue. And at some point in time, I'm sure one of the carrier battle groups will show its face in the Indian Ocean. We need to be prepared for it. So it is a slow and steady process of expanding the influence until the time they are quite confident of, ensuring that that influence in the South China Sea is complete, which is a territorial claim. I think they will not go and enter into anybody's war or anybody else. That does not mean they will not support them otherwise, like I explained earlier. Maybe in terms of the GPS system, the PATO system that they have, or in terms of supplying some equipment. Those things will carry on. But physically, they will not involve themselves.
So the Chinese are known to play the long game. They call it the long game. So is this some sort of a long game where the US is exhausting its resources in West Asia? The Iranians are getting destroyed. The whole West Asian countries, the Gulf countries, they are getting, destroyed to a certain extent. Not like Iran or Israel, but they're getting hurt. So is this? as you said, that the Chinese will come in later with the reconstruction, their sphere of influence increases. So is a win-win game for Beijing right now?
I would think so. Short answer to your question is I would think so, because Beijing is sitting pretty. It is not affected by oil supply. It is not affected by gas supply. What it could probably do is to open the second pipeline, which it is negotiating with Russia, so that landline connectivity for gas passage is there. So basic thing is, I think China is sitting pretty at this point in time with its own problem. I mean, China has got its own problems, economic problems, and other things it's facing itself, which it has to concentrate on at this point in time. And their 15th five-year plan is actually rolling out now, and they'll be more concentrating on those issues. But I think till the time they are building their capabilities to a level where they can really contest the powers that be, I don't think they will get involved into any kind of thing. Actually, it's suppose that long game theory.
Hmm.
Okay. And if you take your mind back, they have their timelines correct. Like, for example, they had those two centenary goals, which people know. One is the 2021, which passed, wherein they wanted to become a moderately well-off society by that time. They declared themselves that they've become moderately well-off society. The second centenary goal is the 2049, when the 100th year of China becoming a republic. They want to be a global power. Okay. The aim is there in 2049. That is the point that they want to reach. And the midway checkpoint is 2035, wherein they want to do the modernization program, they want to do the PLA modernization program, all of them, that's a checkpoint around 2035. So my own reading is still they will get involved into wars. I mean, no power has become a world power without getting involved, without getting its hands dirty and bloody. Okay. So obviously, some wars it will come in future that we'll have to wait and watch. But for the time being, I don't think they will get into any war which will probably put them behind by 10 to 15 years of their goals. Ultimate aim for them is to become a global power by 2049. By 2049, they also expect to have a PLA, the People's Liberation Armed Forces, which are capable of wars, which are capable of winning wars globally. It's a stated aim. They have stated it officially. So till the time they get that capability and the capacity to do those things, I don't think they are going to get involved into any other game. But in case somebody else is doing it, it is at the cost of his own development and his own issues. Like, for example, US is not in a very good place as of now, as far as even economic growth is concerned or other issues are concerned, because of various issues that they've got into in terms of tariffs and other issues. So it'll help China basically to just grow without any external interference coming into affecting that particular growth. So they will do that until the time they are sure of that capability. I don't think they'll go out and do anything in any other place which will put them behind by 10 to 15 years of that goal.
So there is also a school of thought which points out to the fact that Chinese economic footprints in the Gulf region has been expanding exponentially. In 2024, we have the data, it was $257 billion. And it was expected that by 2028, the two-sided trade will be $375 billion. Now, they also import a lot of LNG from this region, the Gulf region, and they have a 24 Israel and China have a $24 billion trade between themselves, which is massive compared to this Iranian and Chinese trade, which amounts to around $13 billion. So it's and there are reports that Chinese have been exasperated with the what should I say, the progress made after the cooperation agreement because of Iranian concerns about their sovereignty, their digital independence, that sort of a thing. So is this also a strategic hedging where they want to have Iran in their sphere of influence, obviously, because it keeps the United States in check, but it also wants to reach out to the Gulf cooperation countries and other countries in the region and have more strongly embedded economic relations with them, and that is why the sort of the ambiguity we see.
There are there is some merit in what you're saying, definitely. You know what has happened with the tariffs being imposed by Mr. Trump on China? Chinese have been wanting to diversify their trade. Previously, there were mainly two blocks. One was, of course, the US, which used to do somewhere around 600 to $700 billion. And equal amount was being done in Europe. Okay. And they were wanting to develop alternate markets so that, in case the US is putting pressure on them on certain issues, they'll be able to diversify their trade in some form. The other thing is they also failed in their efforts to increase the domestic consumption within China. They've been trying this for a very long time, but they have not been able to be successful, which means the Chinese economy is going to be still dependent on the exports that they are doing. If they have to do grow at that 4 to 5% growth, they have to actually rely on export, and they have to go for alternate markets. That is one of the reasons why they also have been reaching out to India. If you take your mind back, if the Chinese have a $1.2 trillion trade surplus, 10% of it at least comes from India. Because our trade deficit this year with China has been more than $100 billion. Okay. So basic thing is that in the process of diversification of the trade, Gulf is a good market that they can actually look for. So that is one of the issues that they need to be doing for hedging part of it. The other thing that they need to look at, no, they have been actually trying to get more and more of this rare earths and minerals, etc. Africa is, of course, one of the regions, and Middle East is another region they will be looking for to get these things going. So there are many aspects in which Chinese will have their own interest in the West Asian countries, and that is going to remain definitely there. So that is one. The second thing is when they actually want to contest US at some point in time, they'll also need allies from various regions of the world. So you will find Europe coming up, you will find other areas like, for example, Pacific Island countries coming up, African countries coming up, and West Asia as a group of countries holds its own weight in terms of international relations. So that is another place where they would like to be investing strongly on that. So there are many reasons as to why China would like to maintain that relationship with the West Asian countries, and Iran being one of them. In any case, they are dependent for various oil and other things from Iran, and so that is, in any case, there's a dependency there. So that is something which will help. And if you take your mind back, even on the Red Sea, where the Bab el Mandeb is there, you find even the Houthis, when they were blocking other ships, etc., they said Chinese ships will be allowed to go. So basically, they do have some kind of hold and some kind of say in these issues, and so they would like to continue to maintain it. So, from your question, I think yes, they have a lot of interest in the West Asian countries, and they would like that relationship to be strong enough for them to be depending on.
Sir, now I'll shift attention to yet another theater, the most important one for the Chinese, the Taiwan question. Xi Jinping has already called it as it's a rejuvenation for him and the Chinese nation. And then he said that the reunification is unstoppable. Now, after the Chinese, I'm sure the Chinese strategic and military community is watching this conflict very closely. They're taking their notes. So, despite all the limitations, the US obviously has a military might, which is being displayed in the West Asian region. So, could this also act as a deterrence for the Chinese because they have the United States has the conventional military might, whereas Taiwan, they are also watching it very closely, obviously. They could be taking notes on the asymmetric warfare, which Iran is doing with the Americans. So, I mean, how does this play out militarily if the United States military might combines with the asymmetrical warfare indulged in by the Taiwan? If it comes to that, I'm not saying that it's going to invade Taiwan, but obviously, as an analysis, how it is going to play out.
You have mentioned three things in your question. One is, of course, rejuvenation, China's national rejuvenation. Second is, of course, the Taiwan issue. Third is how is the military might of US that is to be faced by China at some point. So let me handle the first one first, the rejuvenation. When Xi Jinping came to power in 2012 October, when he was declared as the general secretary, and in 2013 he came to power. That time onwards, he actually made a visit to the Chinese National Museum at that point in November 2012, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And he talked about this national rejuvenation, the China dream, the Chinese dream, Chunko Meng, and this one, national rejuvenation, is something that he talked about even at that point in time. The national rejuvenation of China is an overall concept
Mhm.
in which the territorial integrity is one part.
Sure.
Okay. National rejuvenation is not typically related to only a reunification with Taiwan. Okay. It's an overall concept of China becoming a global power by 2049. And in that, the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country was one part of the national rejuvenation. Okay. And as far as that is concerned, he's progressing on many of the other issues, but Taiwan has been left a little loose because in all their pronunciations or all the leaders when they speak, two things come up. One, they have not fixed a timeline on Taiwan. I mean, this 2027 timeline, all we will talk about, that's a Western concept. Actually, Chinese themselves have not put a date on reunification with Taiwan. None of the leaders. You can go and check. Okay, that is one. The second thing is they always say that we want peaceful reunification with Taiwan. However, we do not rule out use of force. This will always be there in most of the statements that they make. If you go through the statement, that you will come to know very clearly. So that is the second thing that you need to keep in mind. So basic thing about rejuvenation is it's an overall concept within which territorial integrity is one part. In the territorial integrity part, when Taiwan comes up, you need to start thinking about number of things, actually speaking. It is not like, say, Russia, Ukraine. Russia, Ukraine have a common border. Russia just walk across into Ukraine. Okay. You have a Taiwan strait, which is 150 kilometers wide. And that is going to create a lot of problems for the PLA to launch any offensive across the seas to Taiwan. That is one of the reasons why you find China resorting to more of blockade kind of operations over a period of last 2 3 years. You could have seen starting from Nancy Pelosi's visit in 2022 onwards. Okay, you've seen that happening, the blockades happening and things like that. So they are trying out various modes and models of operations, basically to do how to put pressure on Taiwan. That is one. The other thing is both Russia, Ukraine, Hamas, Israel, Iran, Israel, US, all of them have brought one thing very clear to everybody. US may be the most technologically advanced power, but there are countries, innovatively, if they fight, they will be able to take on that might. So this will not be not lost on Chinese, not lost on Taiwan either.
Mhm.
Okay, both of them will be looking at these wars closely as to how they are fighting. So they will draw their own lessons, whichever way they do. But I'm sure even Taiwan will be drawing its own lessons. If a small country, compared to Russia, okay, Ukraine is very small. If they are able to fight for 4.5 years and then still continue to put pressure on Russia, similarly Iran, which thought they'll just walk over, does not happen. Now it has already crossed 1 month and it is progressing further. So both these countries will be studying this very closely. So they will draw their own lessons amongst this particular thing. Okay, that is the second thing that we need to keep in mind. Third thing is about the US military might. Okay, US military might, for all its might, you can go back in history and see how this technology and military superpower has performed. Go, see Vietnam, see Libya, see Iraq, see Afghanistan, see this place in Iran. I mean, technology and military might are one issue. I think what needs to be understood is the way the countries have been fighting these wars.
Mhm.
And that is something which is going to be studied in great amount of detail by China. And if the Chinese draw their own lessons about it, it'll be very, very tough call for even US to take on China or China to take on US, vice versa, whichever way you call it. So these are things that are actually panning out. It is still out in the open how these things are going to happen, and I think we'll have to wait and see as to how these things progress in future.
So I'll come back to you with further progress and to discuss these issues, to analyze what is happening, to analyze, to see what could happen in the future, because that is also very important. We keep remaining stuck in the present and we're missing out on the future also. Lots of things to India to also delve upon, deliberate upon. And thank you so much, sir, for sparing time for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for
Thank
getting
you.
me on the show. Thank
Thank
you.